My name is Sean Kabak with Manitoba Agriculture. In Portage, I'm a forage and livestock specialist with the province. Today I'm going to discuss the 2023 MCVET Annual Forage Trials and how the crops can be used for green feed, silage, and grazing. The MCVET Annual Forage Trials were started 2 years ago and have 5 sites across the province, including Melita, Roblin, Arbour, Carman, and right here in Carberry. The objective of the program is to test different varieties of annual crops for forage yield and quality across the province. 3 replicates of each crop and variety were planted at each site. The trial here was seeded on May the 12th, so today is 75 days after seeding. This year's trials are sponsored by the Manitoba Crop Variety Evaluation Team, the Manitoba Seed Growers Association, Manitoba Beef Producers, and Manitoba Ag. I'd like to thank the Diversification Centres for cooperating on the trials. One of the reasons for initiating the trials is annual crops are more moisture efficient than perennial forages. We saw in the dry years annual crops still had reasonable yields compared to perennial forages, and in wet years annual forages can be used to help remove moisture from the soil and provide feed when seeded late. For example, corn requires 3 inches of moisture to produce 1 ton of dry matter versus 4 inches for barley, 4.5 inches for oats, and over 6 inches for alfalfa or timothy. Both warm and cool season crops were included in the trials. Warm season crops like sorghum, millet, and corn are more drought and heat tolerant. Cool season crops such as oats, barley, and triticale grow better under normal growing conditions that are cooler and wetter. With the serious feed shortages in recent years, it's important to renovate and fertilize perennial forages to maintain production. Younger and properly fertilized perennial forage stands yield better than older stands that lack fertility. MASC forage insurance coverage is higher for forage stands 4 years or younger due to their higher yield potential. Including at least 50% legume in a mix will provide adequate nitrogen to the grass in the stand, saving you on fertilizer cost. Seeding a mix of a winter cereal and a spring cereal can be used for grazing in the spring, or it can be cut for green feed or silage, and the winter cereal will regrow and can be grazed later on in the summer or fall. In this year's trial, we have 4 oat varieties, 3 barley, 1 spring triticale, an oat and pea mixture, a barley and pea mixture, 2 millets, both Proso and Siberian, 1 sorghum, and 1 sorghum Sudan grass. Visually, you can really see the differences between the various crops, which makes the trial very interesting. In general, the varieties for the trials were chosen for their higher grain yield, taller growth, lodging resistance, smooth awns, and better disease resistance. When producers are dealing with late seeding, crop maturity is important. Oats on average requires 96 days to mature for grain, barley needs 88 days, and triticale is 100 days. And there can be up to 3 to 4 days difference in maturity depending on the variety grown. And keep in mind, green feed and silage is cut 10 to 14 days earlier than for grain. When growing forage for livestock, choose a smooth on barley, especially for green feed. Rough awns can become stuck in livestock mouths and cause problems. Better weed control options exist for cereals. In barley, you can spray for both broadleaf and grassy weeds. In last year's trial, after 50 days planting, the barley was headed, oats was starting, and the Proso and Siberian millet was starting to head out, and this year it was similar. In wet springs with late planting, you can still seed up until mid-July and have a reasonable expectation to reach maturity for silage and green feed prior to a late September frost for most of the crops in the trial. And next, we will go through and look at each of the individual crops. So the first crop we will look at in the trial is AB Advantage Barley. It's a 6-row, 1 day later, 15 centimeter taller, smooth on variety with very good lodging resistance. And we look at the maturity, we squeeze the kernel, and it's still in that milk stage. So it still has probably a week to 10 days to mature before it'll be ready for harvest. Next, we have CDC Endure Oats. It's a 1 day earlier maturing than average, 13 centimeter taller, and has very good lodging resistance. Oats was the second highest yielding crop in last year's trial. And if we look at the kernels and squeeze them, it's still in the milk stage as well. Proso millet is an earlier maturing and generally lower yielding variety than the foxtail millets. Both foxtail and Proso millets are suitable for hay, green feed, or silage production, providing good quality feed when cut at the proper stage, which is after heading. Weed control options are limited when growing millet or sorghum. Both 2,4-D and MCPA are registered, but there are no grassy weed options. Spraying pre-emerge or tillage pre-seed to control early weeds will help crops get off to a clean start. And our crown proso millet heads out in 50 to 60 days, and you can see this is fully headed. And millet was the lowest yielding crop in 2022, with proso being lower than our foxtail millet. Our second oat variety in the trial is OT6036. It's a forage oat from Alliance Seed. One of the benefits of the forage oats, it has nice wide leaves, which makes for a nice forage. Spring triticale is from the variety Pronghorn. It's a 96-day triticale, which is 4 days earlier than average and has a good lodging resistance. Triticale is a cross between wheat and rye. Our first mixture is a pea oat mixture, and it's CDC Lowachko peas and CDC Arberg oats. Combining peas and a cereal produces a higher protein feed. Last year, the pea cereal combo had the highest protein, was second for relative feed value and energy, so that makes for a very good overall feed quality crop. The seeding rate was half of normal for both crops, the peas and the oats. Lowachko peas is a mid-maturity, longer vine length variety with very good lodging resistance. If we're only growing peas, harvest at the pod wrinkle. In a cereal mixture, harvest according to the cereal maturity. Here we have sorghum. It looks like it has a bigger stalk similar to corn, so it is best harvested as a silage. Sorghum and sorghum Sudan grass can accumulate prussic acid, which can be lethal to livestock. Prussic acid will dissipate in cured hay or silage. Sorghum will head out in 85 to 90 days, so you can see after day 75, it still hasn't headed out. Based on its tall height and long maturity, sorghum has a very good yield potential. Last year, sorghum was the highest yielding crop in the annual forage trial. Right beside it is CDC Lowachko peas and Advantage barley. This is our Siberian millet. It's a foxtail and heads out in 55 to 60 days, so it's similar to the proso millet. Foxtail millets often have a thicker stem and a waxy surface coating, both which slow down dry time. Golden German millet is a longer maturing compared to the red or Siberian millets and isn't in this year's trial. AB Tofield barley is a 6-row, 1 day longer, 5 centimeter taller, smooth-on variety with very good lodging resistance. Barley last year had the highest overall relative feed value and energy and was second for protein, making it a top option for feed quality. If you run your fingers over the awns, you can tell they're smooth or rough. And these awns are smooth, there's no barbs to catch on your fingers. So that's what you want to be growing, and you should always check on the variety to select a smooth on variety. Beside it is another oat variety, and this is CDC Arberg oats. It's a 2 day earlier, 19 centimeter taller variety with very good lodging resistance. Arberg was the 4th most popular oat grown in Manitoba in 2022 for grain, and Summit was number 1. Then we have CDC Renegade barley, and it's a 2-row, another smooth-on barley, 1 day later maturing than average and 7 centimeters taller and has fair lodging resistance. Even though the lodging resistance is fair, you can see the standability is very good this year. There was some ergot in last year's trials in the barley. Ergot in forage is rarely an issue as it is diluted by the forage volume, but I've seen it cause problems in screenings where it can become concentrated. And Austenson is the most popular barley grown in Manitoba for grain. Haymaker forage oat is a 2 day later, 25 centimeter taller, good lodging resistance variety, but we did see lodging last year. Haymaker oats has a very wide leaf. It's the widest leaf variety in the trial, and that makes it well suited as a forage crop. And the stage of maturity is similar to the other oats and is still in that milk stage. Then our last variety we're going to look at in the trial is sorghum Sudan grass. The sorghum seeding rate was 20 pounds per acre. It will head out in 85 to 90 days. You don't want to seed sorghum or millet too early before the soils have warmed up, or you could have germination and emergence issues. When harvesting annual crops, we want to make sure it's done on a timely basis to provide excellent quality feed, and it can be harvested as green feed, chopped silage, or baled silage. Advantages of harvesting feed as silage include lower nitrate levels, which can be lowered by 30 to 50%, as ensiling decreases the nitrate concentration. Silage harvest is less weather dependent, and there will be less field and storage weathering losses. Annuals are easier to ensile due to their higher sugar content and lower buffering capacity compared to perennial forages. To finish up, harvesting cereals for green feed or silage at the optimal stage will maximize quality and yield. Most annual crops such as barley triticale, should be harvested at early to mid-dough stage, or late milk to early dough for oats when being cut for forage. Millet and sorghum should be cut at early to mid-heading. All of last year's trials, yield and feed quality information were included in Seed Manitoba 2023 and also in Manitoba Beef Producers Cattle Country. So look for this year's results in the same publications.